To start off this part of the playthrough, I wanted to make an apology. If you look at the upload dates for this playthrough, you'll see there's a substantial gap between part 37 and part 38, and that was because I went on an unscheduled hiatus, and unfortunately the Dark Souls 2 playthrough was affected by that, so I apologize for the gap in between the videos in this playthrough, and as a result, it meant that I finished the last part of the game long after I had started it, and as a result it kind of affected my skills with Dark Souls 2, and I was a bit rusty coming back in, and it didn't help that I was on a very challenging area, so I apologize in advance if I play worse than normal. It's because I was trying to get back into the swing of things, and I was a little off my game, so I apologize for that if it's a little hard to watch. But it was important to me that I finish this playthrough because I do not like to leave things unfinished if I can help it, and it was really bugging me that I hadn't finished this playthrough yet, especially when I was so close to the end, so I'm determined to finish it, and with only 2 parts remaining, including this one, I hope you'll enjoy the remainder of my playthrough, and if you have been watching it from the beginning, I want to thank you for supporting me all the way through. So without further ado, let's get into the story of what we're currently doing in Eleum Loyce. So we can actually proceed to the Old Chaos to fight the boss of this area, but it is a very difficult fight if you jump in as it is right now, because you'll only have one knight of Eleum Loyce helping you, and how it works for that boss fight is you fight a whole bunch of hostile knights before the boss himself appears, and in order to make your life easier, you want to have as many knights as possible helping you in this battle, because otherwise you're outnumbered 2 to 1, and it's no fun, trust me. So what we're currently doing is we're searching all across Eleum Loyce for 3 knights that are still loyal to the throne, and these knights will help us take down the fallen king of Eleum Loyce. So we've already rescued 1, so there's 2 other knights to find, and we'll be finding them, and we'll find them deep within hidden sections of this frozen city. As for the lore of the knights, they actually have a substantial amount of lore for the kingdom itself, as well as the Ivory King himself. We learn so much about him through the item descriptions of not only his own once we fight him, but the knights that were loyal to him as well. So to start off, let's look at the Charred Loyce Knights. Those are the knights who went with the Ivory King initially into the Old Chaos, and like the king himself, they have fallen into the Old Chaos, and it has twisted their armor and made it all black and charred, and it is a far cry from the bright silver color that we'll see on the regular Loyce armor. But the item description for the Charred Loyce set reads, "Charred armor of the Knights of Loyce, burned black by flame. These Knights of Loyce plunged into the Old Chaos with their lord, and lost their sense of self. To this day they still burn in agony, alongside their once proud king." And this goes to show the suffering that the king and the knights are in. That not only, it's not bad enough that they've been overcome by the flame of the Old Chaos, but they're also in internal agony because of it. And they're essentially just fighting against anything and everyone that comes their way. But what I like about this bit of lore here is it also shows how dedicated these knights were to their kingdom. They didn't blindly follow their lord into battle. They were pledged to him. It says they wanted to fight alongside their once proud king. We learn a bit more about why that is in the regular version of the Loyce armor set, which is just called the Loyce set. Armor of a Knight of Loyce. The Knights of Loyce were devoted guardians of this land that delved valiantly into the depths of chaos, never to return. The few that survived remain in Eleum Loyce, now frozen over, awaiting the call of their master. Devoted guardians. I think that explains the Knights of Loyce to a T. These are essentially the best knights a kingdom could ask for. They are devoted heart and soul to their king and their kingdom. But it's interesting that it says all the knights went down into the Old Chaos. So not just a couple of them, but all of them. At least that's implied in that lore description there. But it mentions that a few of them that did survive, so somehow they came back from the Old Chaos, whether they somehow found a way to escape, or they were in the ranks that didn't delve into the Old Chaos just then. That's up for debate, but either way, these knights didn't get affected like the rest of them did and managed to escape, and went into hiding throughout frozen Eleum Loyce, awaiting the one who would open the door once again to the Old Chaos so they could be reunited with their master and finally put him to rest. Again, I think it's interesting that we see how devoted these knights were. It might not sound like something that's altogether uncommon in Knights of a Kingdom, but there's something about the Ivory King and the way he's described that I think really inspired a sense of pride in the knights that served him. The lore and the item descriptions make him sound like he was a really regal, noble, proud leader, and one that you would gladly follow into battle just because he was so darned awesome. But regarding the Eleum Loyce Knights, the last bit of lore comes from their soul, which you can actually gather 40 of for Elsana, and she'll give you various armor pieces once you do. It's a very monotonous, tedious part of the game if you choose to do it, I must admit, and that's why I haven't done it for this playthrough. But it is cool if you do manage to do it, because not only do you get to directly talk to Elsana, but you also get the armor set for the Ivory King as well as the Loyce soldiers. Anyways, the description for the Loyce soul reads, "Soul of the Knights of Loyce. The Knights of Loyce were taken by chaos, and lost all sense of purpose and being. The few woeful souls that trudged back home were guided by some faint vestige of self. This soul is pure sorrow, and only Elsana can put it to rest." So I guess it says there that the few woeful souls who managed to escape the old chaos were guided by some faint glimmer of self. So it's still left up for debate how the knights escaped the old chaos, but this does kind of give us a little glimpse into how that might have happened. But this also shows that the knights were stricken with grief at the loss of their king. It says this soul is pure sorrow. That's a very powerful description there, I think, and it speaks to, again, how dedicated these knights were to their leader. And so great is the despair and sorrow of these souls that only Elsana, the queen of this kingdom and a child of the dark, can put it to rest. I just think that the lore behind all of Eleum Loyce, both in its rulers and the priestesses and the knights, is just really fascinating. It once again shows how rich a story that the Dark Souls series has once you delve into it, and that you find all sorts of tales within tales if you really delve into the lore, and I think the Eleum Loyce Knights are a great example of that.
granted my one wish. Now, I have no regrets. I was born amidst the dark. Long ago, in the depths of the abyss, my father perished. The dark shattered into tiny pieces, one of which was me. How frightened I was. A frail thing, born from but a splinter of dark. I felt that I might simply disappear. I am, in fact, the incarnation of my father's fears. I saw that the king of this land was strong. I sought him only to sustain myself, to smother my fears. Now, I realize that he may have known all along. I was born of fear, and my Lord provided comfort. And so, here I remain, heiress to my Lord's wishes, watching over chaos. Until the end of time. The Knights of Eleum Loyce were swallowed by the chaos, where their souls still remain. I pray for their deliverance.
And thus ends the story of the Crown of the Ivory King. I have to say that the Burnt Ivory King is definitely one of my favorite bosses in all of Dark Souls 2. It's such a grand, epic battle, and I love the music and the surrounding arena that you fight him in. It's such a cool fight. Even if it's not the most challenging one in the game, it's such an awesome fight. Anyways, to delve quickly into the lore for the Burnt Ivory King, we first look into the armor set, which reads, Armor of the Ivory King of Eleum Loyce. The land of Eleum Loyce was a vast rampart built to contain the ancient chaos. The Ivory King placed his throne upon the very mouth of chaos and served as its first line of defense. This shows essentially that Eleum Loyce was built to protect the world from the wrath of the old chaos, and the Ivory King himself, the very king of the land, took up the charge to drive back the forces of the old chaos and keep it at bay. And I think that's such a cool and powerful bit of character for the Ivory King. But we actually learn a bit more about his past if you look at the description for his weapon, which is the Ivory King Ultra Greatsword, which reads, It is said that the Ivory King was once the highest-ranking knight in his home of Ferosa, famed for its god of war. After taking his crown, they say he was the first to swing his sword in times of need, be it for his homeland or for his people. And this essentially confirms that the Ivory King is one of the best kings in the entire Dark Souls series. He's noble, he's a benevolent ruler, he's a shield for his people, and he protects all that is good in his kingdom. He ultimately fails, which really is the tragedy of his story, in that he dies fighting and is corrupted by the very thing he devoted his life to protecting the world from. And it's sad that we kind of have to put him to rest when he fought so hard and so valiantly to stop the forces of the old chaos. Very few kings in the Dark Souls series are described as such as the Ivory King, and I really think that speaks to his character. The soul actually reads that he was ever merciful and devoted himself to the protection of his great land until he was devoured by the flames of chaos. So ultimately, the Ivory King was a hero, right till the very end. And in that sense, he's a very rare character in the Dark Souls series. And in my opinion, that's what makes him one of the most memorable.